One topic in the news lately has been the origins of SARS-CoV-2. I mean, do you believe, or is there evidence that SARS-CoV-2 was made in a lab in China or accidentally released from a lab in China?
Well, you know, there's two issues. If you look at the evolution of the virus in bats and what's out there now, it's very, very strongly leaning towards this could not have been artificially or deliberately manipulated, the way the mutations have naturally evolved. A number of very qualified evolutionary biologists have said that everything about the stepwise evolution over time strongly indicates that it evolved in nature and then jumped species. One of the issues of saying, could that virus that was in, first of all, if you accept the premise, which is very strongly supported by scientific evidence, that it was not deliberately mutated and deliberately changed. And you say, if it was in the wild and evolving, the likelihood it jumped species naturally. Someone will say, well, maybe somebody took it from the wild, put it in the lab, and then it escaped from the lab. But that means it was in the wild to begin with. So that's why I don't get what they're talking about. If it isn't manipulated in the lab and you're trying to say it escaped from the lab, then how did it get in the lab? It got in the lab because somebody isolated it from the environment. So that's the reason why I don't spend a lot of time going in that circular argument.
What's your advice to the public at large for sifting through the headlines and making sense of it all?
Yeah, for the general public, it's really tough because anybody can claim to be an expert, even when they have no idea what they're talking about. And it's very difficult for the general public to distinguish. But I think one of the things you need to do is see if it's coming from a reputable organization that generally gives you the truth, even though even from some reputable organizations, you occasionally get an outlier who's out there talking nonsense. I think if they look at what comes out of journals that are well-established journals, peer-reviewed, when they read a newspaper article, find out what the source of it is, particularly if it's a source of someone who's not even in the field. I mean, if something comes out in the New England Journal or in Science or in Nature or in Cell or one of those, or Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, and places like that, you know generally that it's quite well peer-reviewed because the editors and the editorial staff of those journals really take things very seriously.
Thinking long term, I mean, what do you most hope to see change in the wake of this crisis? You know, what would your policy recommendations be to prevent a similar crisis from happening in the future?
Well, I think we're going to be put to that test. And we're going to be put to that test as we get into the fall and winter of this year of 2020. Because it is likely, if we do it correctly, that we will be able to blunt and diminish the daily rate of infections in this country as we get into the summer. Can't guarantee it, but if we do it right, that likely will happen. Another thing that likely will happen is that we get into next fall and winter, since I don't think there's a chance that this virus is just going to disappear. It's going to be around, and if given the opportunity, it will resurge. So the thing that is the big unknown and that we really need to do is that we now will have a few months, May, June, July, August, to prepare by making sure our health system is adequately supplied, ventilators, ICU beds, personal protective equipment, etc., to make sure we have enough tests available and the system to implement those tests. Not just say we have tests, but do the people who need and should get tested, so that by the time we get to September, we don't have the dialogue continually fixating on, do you have enough tests? Do you have enough tests? Do you have enough tests? Shame on us if we don't have enough tests by the time this so-called return might occur in the fall and winter.